Hello, party people. It is me. I am back, and we got 5 very interesting things coming up. Did a lot of reading over the past, I don't know, few weeks, whatever it's been. Now that the summer is here, the weather is great. I am sitting on my back deck and reading another set of books on top of the ones I'm already reading. I usually have one I read at work when I'm on break and stuff. I have one at home that I read like in bed and whatnot. And then during the summertime, I have a series of books that I read on the back deck in the sun. So I have up to 3 books going on at any given time. So it's only going to be natural that over the next little while, we're going to be seeing a lot of books. And I have a theme for the books I'm reading outside this year. You might pick up on it after a while. But anyways, the first book up, released in 2007, A Lion's Tale. What's up, kitty? Around the World, or no, yeah, Around the World in Spandex. That's the subtitle for this. So this is the biography of Chris Jericho. If you don't know Chris Jericho, he is a wrestler that was, he came to WWE at kind of the back end of the Attitude Era and injected yet another huge name into an already huge, amazing roster. But so this is the story of his life. So it doesn't go into a ton of stuff of when he was like a kid or anything. He was born in Winnipeg to a father who played in the NHL, Ted Irvine for the Rangers, I believe it was. His mom eventually had an accident that left her paralyzed, so he suffered some misfortune there with his mom. And basically, but it chronicled his entire passion for wrestling from when he was over at his grandma's house on Sunday nights or whatever it was, and his grandma was like, "It's time for wrestling," and so that was his earliest memory of watching wrestling with his grandma in his grandma's basement or whatever. And then him and a buddy at school created, I forget the league they called it, but it was a wrestling league that they made up, and they would run through all these matches, and they would scam themselves to get into the school and use the crash mats and put on like wrestling shows kind of thing. So he was big time into wrestling, right from the get-go. He was also musically inclined as well. So, he played, I think, bass it was, from a young age, and was also very interested in music, specifically a lot of metal and stuff like that. So as he got older, one of his things that he aspired to do was he really liked watching Owen Hart in the WWE, and he wanted to meet Owen Hart and become his tag team partner. That was like his childhood dream sort of thing, right? So eventually Jericho saw, he used to watch like Stampede Wrestling, which was out of Calgary, and that is where the Hart family lives. And so Jericho finally saw, and Chris Jericho is not his real name. I forget what it actually is. I should know that after reading it. Yeah, I forget. But anyways, he would also go to wrestling events in the Winnipeg arena. His dad would take him, and he would see all these matches, and he developed all these bonds with the wrestlers and whatnot. So as he got a little older, wrestling seemed to be a thing he wanted to do. And when he was watching Stampede Wrestling, he saw an advertisement for the Hart family wrestling academy, like training kind of thing. So he asked his dad if he could do it. He saved up his money. He went out to Calgary, or Okotoks, I guess is the town it was actually in. It wasn't exactly what he was expecting, but he got an introduction to wrestling. He did some training, and he was one of the top guys there, based on kind of his descriptions of the other people that showed up to train. What are you doing? You chasing your tail? Crazy woman. Do you need to have me let you out? Do you need to go out, Fuzz? Do you want out? Here you go. Here you go. I'm closing the door though, okay? Guarantee should be scratching on the door in the next minute. Anyways, so yeah, he went to this wrestling school. He got kind of a crash course, and then eventually it just chronicles, his steps on where he eventually got booked. His first stop was in Mexico. And at the Wrestling Academy, he met a wrestler named Lance Storm, who he developed a real big friendship with, and who he would do things with in the future in all the different kind of companies that he went to. So, like I said, first one, he was down in Mexico for a while. He said he really enjoyed it there. Went over some funny anecdotes, like the one time he met up with this couple in a bar that said they were big fans and like, do you want to go to a party? And so he got in the car with them and they drove him out into the boonies and then robbed him. So he said there was lots of lessons to be learned along the way. So lots of funny little anecdotes sprinkled throughout. Then he went to, I believe, Germany for some sort of tournament that was very different. And then he came back to he went to the States for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which is down in the southeast United States somewhere. I believe it was maybe Tennessee, something like that. I can't remember. And then eventually he got on with WCW and tried to make a big name for himself there. But they weren't using guys like him correctly. Eric Bischoff. The thing I was one of the most interesting things about this book was after watching the Monday Night Wars, WCW versus WWE, which WWE eventually won, obviously, to hear people, the guys that were involved in it, especially from both sides, to weigh in on their thoughts on that. Everybody I've heard so far comments on how ridiculous WCW was, how there was no communication, they just threw money around, they didn't care about the undercard guys, it was all about the big guys they signed from WWE like Hogan and Kevin Nash and the Macho Man. They just wanted to get the big guys propped up, and then everybody under them didn't really matter in the company, right? So you had all these guys with a lot of potential that weren't seeing a proper opportunity, right? So WCW, he had some highs, but it was more lows until he was finally able to get out of it. And it was really interesting and then he went to Japan for a little while before finally he was able to, I forget who it was, but somebody like recommended Jericho to Vince McMahon, and finally they like got in touch or whatever. And while Jericho was still under contract with WCW, but not being used, he had a secret meeting with Vince, and they kind of set something up for him to eventually come to WWE. And when that time finally came, they're like, okay, how are we going to introduce you? Blah, blah, blah. And then it leads right into the moment where Jericho, right at the end of the book, where Jericho was finally introduced to the WWE universe. And it was 1999, right before, I think it was the end of the summer. And he came up with this idea of a countdown clock, because it was leading up to the millennium and the Y2K, and how computers were going to crash, planes would fall out of the sky, right? So he kind of kept seeing these clocks or whatever, and then he was like, what if I had a countdown clock for my intro to WWE? So he went to Vince, and they're like, that's a great idea. So I still remember this because to the day, like I remember this, just that clock coming up, the weird music all of a sudden on the Jumbotron during an episode of Raw or whatever. This weird clock would come up, and there would be these like noise effects, like and the clock would be counting down, and you're like, what's happening? What's coming, right? And then finally on the night where it counted down to 0, he came out onto the top of the ramp while The Rock was in ring cutting a promo, interrupted The Rock, got into a big kind of back and forth with The Rock, and there it was. And it was funny because he talks about the Jericho curse, where in almost every company he went to, his first match was always a dud. He always threw out a terrible first match. So he called that the Chris Jericho curse. And he finally conquered it with his entrance into WWE, because that was one hell of an entrance and one hell of a promo that him and The Rock did together. So yeah, just some very interesting insights from a guy that was not only in the WWE during the Attitude Era, but was also on the other side with the WCW. Everybody nobody ever seems to have a personal problem with like Eric Bischoff or whatever, like it's just business or whatever. But everybody talks about how terrible WCW was run. So it's no wonder they lost in the end, right? Just but yeah, it's just wrestling's such a weird industry. So to hear these stories and the way things happen in the biz from the guys that live it, right, are it's very interesting. So. And apparently he's written 2 more books after that. So there's lots of Jericho stuff out there. But that was I think his first book that he did. So I had to read it. I had to see what the Ayatollah of rock and rolla had to say. And it also talks about like how his music career continued. He eventually joined a band called Fozzy, and getting record deals and stuff like that. So he's also a musician at the same time. The guy's he can kind of do a little bit of everything, that guy. So Jericho's awesome. He's a super talent, and Canadian too. So that's always nice. Next up, book 3 of the Gatekeeper trilogy, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Sons of Entropy. So, as the last book left off, Buffy and Giles and Angel were in Sunnydale, and they had sent Cordelia, Willow, and Xander on the ghost roads to get to the gatehouse in Boston because Xander had been shot and was dying. So they wanted to get him to the gatehouse and then put him in the cauldron that sustained, like could bring people back to life and replenish them, that the gatekeeper always was using because he was so old, to keep him alive and keep him able to keep the gatehouse intact and defend it against all these attackers from El Maestro and his forces, right? So that's what was happening. So what they needed to do was get the new gatekeeper, like Jean-Marc's son, Jacques, to Boston, to the gatehouse, so that he could become the new gatekeeper and set everything there back to rights. Except Buffy was being selfish because her mom had been kidnapped, Joyce, by the Sons of Entropy. And she wanted to get her mom back first and foremost. So she was kind of choosing a personal relationship over the fate of the whole world, right? So they talk about that a lot in the book. So basically you have this kind of war going on 2 fronts. We see Cordelia, Willow, and Xander finally make it to the gatehouse. They finally get Xander into the cauldron, and it doesn't look like it's going to work at first, but finally he comes back to life, but then he starts like wigging out and shit. And after he comes around, he's acquired the power of the gatekeeper. So all of a sudden Xander, and at this point the original gatekeeper dies just before Xander goes into the cauldron. So essentially the gatehouse has picked up on the fact that the gatekeeper is dead, and so when Xander is put into the cauldron, he is kind of blessed with the powers of the gatekeeper, and he is now kind of in control of things. So once he comes out of the cauldron and he's fully restored, he is the one keeping the gatehouse in check and fighting off the Sons of Entropy as they continually try to get into the gatehouse and bring it down. So that's what's happening there. In the meantime, a new player arrives on the scene, a guy named Ethan, who is like an evil sorcerer. Apparently they had adventures with him before, and he's probably in the TV series. I just don't remember. So he wants to help them because he's like, I love chaos, but I don't, if the world ends and hell is unleashed on Earth, my brand of chaos isn't going to survive in that, right? I need the world as a good place, a mostly good place, in order for my shenanigans to still continue to be effective, right? So he wants to help them. So Ethan has a few secrets, and one of them is he knows where Joyce is being kept. So he comes and talks to Giles and Buffy and Angel and whatever and says, I know where Joyce is. So then they mount kind of a rescue mission to get Joyce back. So finally, when they do that, they can then start talking about getting Jacques back to Boston. However, in the meantime, Il Maestro, or Giacomo Fulcanelli, as his real name is, has started attacking the gatehouse personally. So Xander has to fight back like this supremely powerful evil sorcerer. What happens is Buffy and Giles stay behind in Sunnydale, but they send Jacques along with Angel and Oz on the ghost roads, because all three of them have been touched by the supernatural. They can go on the ghost roads to get back to the gatehouse so that Jacques can take over the gatehouse and repel Fulcanelli. The only problem is it's Oz's time of the month, and he's becoming a werewolf, so that complicates things. There's all sorts of complications as we're going along here. So they are making their way to the gatehouse so that they can get Xander off the hook and finally put the Il Maestro idiot to bed. In the meantime, the demon Belphegor, whatever his name is, that Il Maestro was working in conjunction with to try and bring this hell to Earth, has gone to Sunnydale and is pursuing Buffy personally. So there is a war being waged in Sunnydale that Buffy isn't sure if she can win. And then all of a sudden, like, the Flying Dutchman shows up again. Like, things are leaking out of the gatehouse because Xander's trying to hold it together while also fighting off Fulcanelli. So it's just chaos everywhere. And it eventually culminates with these two final battles. Once Angel and Oz are able to get Jacques to the gatehouse and instate him as the new gatekeeper, there's one final battle there as he takes on Fulcanelli for a winner-takes-all kind of battle. And then same thing, Buffy versus Belphegor in Sunnydale. So those are kind of the two final battles, and they wrap up, and it's the end of the story. And of course, the good guys win because of the TV series, right? So what I liked about this book, other than that it was just a really cool story, was that, especially in this third book, it left so many people in uncomfortable situations. Like Angel and Joyce got left alone at his hangout, wherever he lives, while they were looking over Jacques, while Buffy and Giles were doing their thing. And, you know, Joyce is a little uncomfortable with Angel because he's a vampire and she knows about him and Buffy and whatever. So, and then there's other people too that are kind of left alone together that normally wouldn't be. And it's really awkward. So there's a lot of personal growth and development in this book between certain characters, kind of thing, right? And I really like that kind of awkward element to the whole thing, right? So great trilogy. That was I've read probably, they're right there. There's 2, 4, 6. So that's my 9th Buffy book, obviously part of a trilogy. So the 6 books that came before this trilogy were all one-offs. And then this one being a trilogy, that was my first series in the expanded Buffyverse. But I loved the story. The overall story was really cool. It was really, really action-packed, you know, flipping pages like crazy. But all the individual books too, I've really loved. The expanded Buffyverse has been very entertaining and lots of fun. So I was very happy with the way this trilogy story ended off. Next up, released in 2003, The Stone Cold Truth. The Stone Cold Steve Austin fucking biography. So Stone Cold was, he's from Texas. I forget where he was born, but when he was young, his dad ran out on the family when he was very young, and fortunately a new guy was able to step in to his life and date his mom and eventually get married, who was a really good guy. And they moved to a small town called Edna, Texas, I believe it was. And I think he had 2 brothers and a sister, or maybe it was 3 brothers and a sister. I think it was just 2 brothers. So a fairly big family. And he's like, my dad was, you know, and his stepdad is as like who he calls his dad, because he was more of a dad than his actual dad. He was firm but fair, sort of thing, right? So he talked about the trouble he and his brothers, or he and some of his friends, would get in, and you know, the repercussions they would get after being found out and whatever. So there's a bit of stuff on his childhood and stuff. But it was mostly once he was, you know, talking about college age and stuff, and how he played football growing up and he was really good at it. And so he got like full ride scholarships to some schools like in Texas. It seemed like he never wanted to stray too far. Like he got offers for school in New Mexico and whatever, but he loved his family, and he was always like, he would pick the best option for him that was closest to home, sort of thing, right? So he went to college, played football, met a girl that he, you know, eventually fell in love with, and they hooked up and got together and eventually got married and stuff. But he said, my first marriage was doomed when I got the wrestling bug. Like, he started watching a lot of wrestling. He would go to the Dallas Sportatorium, I think it was called, to watch wrestling shows. and it really kicked off this idea in his head that would eventually lead to him being like, I got to do this, sort of thing. So eventually, I believe he saw, while watching wrestling on TV from the Sportatorium, he saw an ad for, I forget, the guy's name is Chris. He ended up being a real big swindler, but he ran a wrestling school that Stone Cold went to, and that's where he kind of learned the basics and the essentials, and eventually he would work his way to finally sign with WCW. He had some stops beforehand. He worked out in an outfit in Tennessee, and a local one in Texas, and he started building up a big name for himself. And once he got to WCW, he was used kind of like Jericho. He wasn't used properly. They didn't give him enough opportunity. When he was out there doing his thing, he was doing it well, and it was getting over with the fans. But the problem was, Bischoff didn't like the undercard guys getting over with the fans. And a lot of the guys at the top, like Scott Hall and those guys, didn't want it either, because they were the top dogs. They didn't want anybody being better than them, right? Who were below them, sort of thing, right? So again, the politics and all the bullshit in WCW really complicated his time there, and eventually forced him out, sort of thing, right? And he talked about a guy named Brian Pillman, who I remember, but I don't remember that well, who he did tag with in WCW. And that's when they were really gaining a lot of momentum. They were a tag team that worked really well together. They were getting over with the fans, and then boom, just canceled, kind of thing, by Bischoff and those guys. So again, another guy saying how shitty WCW was run. You know what I mean? But eventually, I forget who it was. Was it JR? I think it was JR, because JR was in WCW when Stone Cold was there, and knew how good Stone Cold was going to be. And so when JR eventually went over to WWE, I think it was JR, told Vince about Stone Cold and like, you should sign this guy, right? It may not have been JR, it may have been somebody else, but somebody lit, the fire under him, under Vince, to look at Stone Cold. And eventually it happened. And once Stone Cold was signed to WWE, he still had hair. He came in and he did well, but he wasn't the Stone Cold that we all knew. The bald with the vest and everything. Like, he was a little bit different when he got there, but eventually, he figured out his character, and they wanted creative at WWE wanted him to be certain something and have certain type of music, and he's like, no, that's not me. He always talks about in the book how he wasn't afraid to put input in and say, I don't feel comfortable with that, like, I want to do this. Like, he definitely had insight on what he wanted his character to be and that kind of stuff, right? So eventually he developed that Stone Cold Steve Austin persona, and then the rest is history, and his ongoing feud with Vince McMahon that just made for so much good TV. And up until, like, the book kind of starts with him leading up to a crazy series of events that started the morning of his last match, which was at WrestleMania 19, I believe it was, in 2003, against The Rock. I think that was it. About how he was like, he thought he was gonna have a heart attack. He had to go to the hospital and get hooked up on IVs because his health wasn't great. So then it starts with that, and then it goes into his childhood, and then as the book comes to a close, it loops back to his final match at WrestleMania against The Rock, and just kind of sums up his whole career and all of his experiences, and where he thinks he might go in the future after he retires from active wrestling. Talking about would I like to stay in the industry? Sure, I could work with talent. I could do this. I could do that. He was very open to remaining in the mix on WWE, but just not being an in-ring talent, right? And throughout the book, it talks about his failed marriages. So he had a few of them. One of them, he was married to Deborah, who was a diva during the Attitude Era, and he talks about an incident that he can't talk about legally in the book, but he's like, look it up, you'll find it, no problem. A domestic abuse situation. So he was very honest about everything, and you could tell it was his words in the book, because he would repeat himself a lot, especially when it came time to give people their props and be like, I had a lot of respect for this guy, and he gave me this opportunity, like, and I really appreciate that. And he repeat himself about those types of things about certain people and stuff like that. It just, the language used in the book very much seemed like it was coming straight from Stone Cold's mouth, kind of thing, right? So, just another interesting insight into, a very significant wrestler from my favorite time of wrestling, right? So another icon from the wrestling heyday I witnessed as a young man and miss greatly as well. So another great wrestling book. That's Jericho and Stone Cold Steve Austin down. Who might I have next, right? Next up, from the year 2025, Power Rangers S.P.D. So I believe this is let me just count here. I think it's the 12th version of Power Rangers. So if you remember, it's been a while since I've done a Power Rangers review, but the first Power Rangers team with Kimberly as the Pink Ranger, Kimberly, that crew ran for like 3 seasons. And then after their run was done, each season of Power Rangers was a different team, kind of thing. So this is the 12th incarnation of the Power Rangers team, and S.P.D stands for Space Patrol Delta. So it's the year 2025. There's lots of different beings on Earth now, like aliens have come to Earth for sanctuary if the things are happening on their planet. So it's a very diverse kind of crowd on Earth now. And at the beginning of the series, SPD's A team goes out on a mission and never comes back. So the B team is kind of promoted to be the next active team on duty. There's only 3 of them. Sky, who is kind of their leader, Sydney, who is super hot, and then Bridge, who is kind of like the nerdy, dorky guy. One of their first jobs is to track down these 2 thieves, and they chase this guy and this girl through the streets, eventually bring them in. The guy's name is Jack, the girl's name is Z, and they're brought back to SPD headquarters, but something special is detected about these 2, and they are offered, you can either do time for your crimes or you can join SPD and fill out our B team. So they choose to do that, and but there's a bit of strife within the team because Sky thinks he should be the leader, but Jack comes on after almost being arrested by them and becomes the Red Ranger and leads the team. So there's some butting of heads within the team at the start, and but eventually, and it goes on throughout the series, especially in the first portion, but eventually they obviously work things out and start to function well as a team. And they are led by Doggy Kruger. So he's like this big dog man, no other words for it. And then their tech person is Kat Manx, who is this girl that has kind of like little cat ears and little things on her cheeks. She's super hot. And then Boom is a guy that also helps them out for support kind of thing. And he's the klutz of the show, right? So basically they're repelling threats from a guy named Grum, who is trying to invade Earth. And of course he sends all his little minions that he cooks up. And then of course when they get defeated, they go into their super size, and then the Rangers get the Megazords, and then they battle them down. So similar format, only maybe this isn't the truth, but I feel like in this incarnation of the Rangers, there were a lot less battles against the standard format, like the bad guy sends one of his minions down, they fight, and then he grows big, and then they kill him for good. I felt like that there was less of that in this series. There was a little more variation in the types of enemies they encountered and the types of situations they encountered. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I remember from it personally. And then Grum had with him this little girl that could draw things, and then he could bring her drawings to life as enemies for the Rangers and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. And so in the end, it's just, final confrontation against Grum, and of course they have to take him down to save the Earth. But this one took me a while to watch because I have a hard time staying awake at night, and I watch these episodes in bed. So sometimes it'll take me 3 nights to watch one episode because I fall asleep and then I have to rewatch it the next night. Plus, I don't know, it's just been a crazy year, and I have so much going on, and so many other pursuits that I'm into, that I couldn't necessarily sit down and spam the Power Rangers, but I hope to be more consistent on the next one anyways. But of course, one of my favorite parts of a Power Rangers season is always the same. It's when they bring back the previous show's Rangers for a cameo. In this one, they only brought back 3 Rangers from the Dino Thunder series that came before this one. Who did Ethan, Kira, and Connor, I think it was. Kira's so hot. Oh my god. So they brought them back for a couple of episodes that involved some space travel or time travel and that kind of shit. So it was cool to see them back again. But overall, I enjoyed the series. It wasn't one of my favorites, but again, it's kind of like my Buffy books, like, and my Xena books and whatever. Like, some may be better than others, but they're all really good, right? So I did enjoy Power Rangers S.P.D, but it wouldn't be at the top of my list in terms of my favorite of the Power Rangers series. But also, since it took me so long to watch the whole series, maybe that kind of made me feel that way, because it was kind of disjointed and it wasn't more all one seamless experience, you know. Maybe that would have changed things, but either way, it is what it is. We'll take it for what it is. Now, last up, another TV series, Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. I took a chance on this because there's 2 things about it. One, as you can see, it's for super young kids. Like, it's going to be pretty basic and low brow, right? And 2, it takes place in the High Republic era. And I, as you may or may not remember, I started reading some of the High Republic books, but found them very woke and was not enjoying them all that much. So I cut myself off the High Republic books and just stopped reading that section of Star Wars books. And it doesn't help too that books are now, you know, you go to Indigo to buy a brand new Star Wars book, you're looking at $25 as a minimum, more if you want the hardcover or whatever. Like, that's crazy. So if this book I know is probably going to rub me the wrong way, I'm not going to fucking buy it. So I just cut the High Republic out of my life. So I was a little nervous for this being in the High Republic era. The show was super young kids, but I didn't really see any woke stuff in it, or not a lot anyway. So I didn't mind it, but it was, you know, for young kids, so it wasn't that stimulating. But you know me, if it's related to my favorite things like Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, I want to read it, I want to see it, I want to take that information and that story in, because it's part of one of my favorite universes. So it doesn't matter if it's for super adults or super children, I want to consume it and see what's going on, right? So I had to. But basically the story, I think it said there's 55 episodes. I don't remember watching that many, but each episode is actually 2 mini episodes. So I wonder if they count it that way, right? So each episode is actually 2 sort of thing. Then that would make more sense. But anyways, like I said, it takes place in the High Republic era, which takes place hundreds of years before, you know, the Phantom Menace and that kind of timeline. And it follows 2 young Jedis in training, Kai, Liz, and Nubs, as they go to the planet Tanu with their master. I think their master is Zia or something like that, or Nia, something like that. And Yoda shows up every once in a while to give them some tutelage as well. So they go to planet Tanu to live in the Jedi outpost there, and do their training and all that kind of stuff. So basically, a lot of the times they're solving little problems on Tanu, but they also get sent to nearby planets to take care of other business. One of the main characters that they come up against is a young bounty hunter, scoundrel, smuggler, thief kind of guy named Tabor, who they come into contact with many times throughout the series, who they eventually make see reason and turn him more to the good side by the end of the series. And other times they're solving things. There may be other bad guys that they have to take down. They're also solving like ecological things, like, oh, why is this happening in the forest and all the water going away and now the plants are dying, you know, those types of problems. So it's very meant to get kids, thinking about, sharing and helping, and nature is good, and being a bully is bad, like those kind of lessons that you get in these episodes. The animation is pretty good. The stories, I thought, for little kids, they're pretty good stories. So overall, a decent series. It's just very meant for young kids. So take it from me, it's not for everyone. It's meant for kids, and that very much is the truth of the series. So, but like I said, I had to take it in. I felt it was worth it. It'll go on the shelf. We'll start on the next thing. So yeah, those are the 5 things for now. Like I said, I'm reading lots of books right now, so we will have more books next time around. But I do hope to get some game completions and some other stuff going on, because I don't want it to be all books. But hey, we'll let fate decide, and I'll just roll with the punches, right? Anyways, that's all for now. I will see you next time. In the meantime, stay cool. Unless you like the heat, then stay warm.
Meow.